I see that everyone got the memo about getting up at 2 o'clock last night and changing the time. So we all made it here. That little bit of effort of getting up, Daniel, in the middle of the night pays off, doesn't it? I'm just kidding. If y'all like me, I change them way before I go to bed, so I don't have to worry about that 2 o'clock thing. But anyway, good to be here this morning. We're in Numbers chapter 19, and this morning, and we're moving right along with it. We're going to probably spend a little time when we get over into Numbers chapter 20. We might bleed over into Numbers chapter 20. There's a whole lot going on in Numbers chapter 20. One, we're going to find right off the bat that Miriam is going to die. We're also going to find that Aaron is going to die. And also we find that Moses, instead of speaking to the rock, he strikes a rock. So there's a whole lot going on in Numbers 20. But right now we're going to concentrate on Numbers chapter 19. And the conversation is going to go something like this. We're going to talk about the sacrifice that God has given about the red heifer for purification, the water of separation, and the use of it for purification. So this is another one of those things in the law of Moses that God has set up for the purification process. And we know if we went back and we tried to capture all these different sacrifices and things like that they did, there is a whole host of them, and I'm not even going to attempt to try to enumerate them, okay? I don't have enough memory storage up here to do it even if I tried, okay? So that would strictly be on a chart or on a piece of paper, okay? And we're not going to spend a lot of time because we've kind of been through this. The red heifer is a little different because, one, that is a female cow that normally a heifer is considered not to have given birth yet, so it is a type of pure sacrifice, and we're going to see what it symbolizes as this unfolds. So about the red heifer, Numbers 19, despite its ancient context, speaks to the timeless truth about purity, spiritual cleansing, and the importance of obedience to God's command. It prompts us to reflect on our lives, seek purification from our sins, and uphold obedience to God's law. Verses 1 to 10, the red heifer ritual. Daniel, we'll begin over there with you. Would you read verses 1 through 10, please?
Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "This is the ordinances of the law which the Lord has commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect, and on which a yoke has never come. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest, that he may take it outside the camp, and it shall be slaughtered before him. And Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger, and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times directly in front of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight, its hide, its flesh, its blood, and its offal shall be burned. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet, and cast them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer. Then the priest shall wash his clothes, he shall bathe in water, and afterward he shall come into the camp. The priest shall be unclean until evening. And the one who burns it shall wash his clothes in water, bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. Then a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and store them outside the camp in a clean place. And they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for the water of purification. It is for purifying from sin. And the one who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. It shall be a statute forever to the children of Israel and to the stranger who dwells among them.
Okay, so here we are, and of course, we see down here, after we get down that, to about verse 9, it tells us it's a purification process for sin, okay? So this is another one of the purification processes that God has established for sin, and He gives the direction how he wants it. This particular helper, though, for purification process is not going to be burned in the camp. It's not going to be burned into in the walls of the tabernacle like the rest of the sacrifices are. It's going to be wholly consumed outside the camp. And we're going to see what this is all about here in just a minute. It's a type and shadow of something that's going to come in the future. So he has laid this down. The blood itself now would be sprinkled, if you will, around the tabernacle itself, the blood, but the carcass, the hide, and the rest of the heifer is going to be burned outside the camp. So only the blood was going to be applied in the area of the tabernacle. And there's a reason for this, and we're going to see that here in just a minute. In these verses, God instructs Moses and Aaron about the red heifer ritual. A red heifer without blemish is to be slaughtered outside the camp. Eleazar, Aaron's son, is to sprinkle some of the blood in front of the tent of meetings. The heifer is then burned along with cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet wool, and the ashes are used in the waters of purification. So let's see what this is all about. Okay, we're going to break it down about what this is all about. One of the things, have you noticed as we go through this, after these sacrifices are being done and things of that nature, what was one of the requirements for those that were doing the sacrifices and the butchering and all that? In order for them to be cleansed, what did they have to do? Wash. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? And of course, this being physical, not only did they wash themselves, but they washed them clothes too. And at this point in time, because it has to do with making sure they were clean, they had to wait until evening to do any more activities, okay? But the thing is, what's interesting is a lot of times you hear people make the statement, well, there's really no water involved in the Old Testament. What have we seen so far? A lot of water, hadn't we? A lot of water, okay? So water has always been a part of God's plan for cleanliness, okay? And, of course, we know this was physical cleanliness here. Today, water is a part of the plan for our spiritual cleansing, isn't it? So we find that it's always been a part of the plan. The cleansing process involves what? Water. And, it's kind of interesting, even in the world today, a lot of times, we went through the COVID period. We go through, I guess we're starting to have flu again. It looks like when different things crop up, even when you go to school, right? I mean, as little kids, what is the thing that is stressed the most about cleanliness? Wash your hands. That's what I've always found interesting about all this. The bottom line comes down to, doesn't hurt every once in a while, Greg, to wash your hands and your face. And maybe even when you say hands a lot of times, we're talking about maybe the forearm here too with it. Get all the contamination off so you don't ingest it. And that's usually what happens is that you become contaminated with something by your hands and you pick up something to eat, and what happens? You ingest it, don't you? But I always thought that real interesting. Just a very simple, basic principle still apply in life. You want to be a little clean? Eric? When I wash your hands every once in a while, occasionally, okay? Don't do like we did on the farm, be hot, sweaty, be out there farming, toting fertilizer, and mama bring a little lunch. Well, you're out in the middle of a field, where you going to get water? Ray, probably wasn't a good practice eat with that fertilizer and all on our hands, was it? Okay, but anyway, the whole point is to be cleansed. So, with that. And so, here's some things, too, that he's going to use as a part of this for the water of purification. Talks about cedar wood. Now, what's significant about cedar wood? Cedar wood is resistant to disease and rot and is well known for its quality, preciousness, and fragrant aroma. And I know around the holiday period, a lot of times we'll go out, we'll cut down a cedar tree or something, and we'll splinter it up, and we'll set it around in baskets, in our homes and things like that, because of that aroma, that odor that it puts off, and it smells so good, doesn't it? When we do those kind of things, I know some of the ladies I used to work with come around the holiday season. They said, "You gonna cut us some of that good smelling wood?" Oh yeah, I'll bring you some good smelling wood. Okay. So anyway, cedar even today it's a prized wood. A lot of times hope chests for ladies. Mostly, I know, is made out of cedar wood a lot of times, and some very high dollar furnishings are usually made out of what? Cedar wood. So even still today, cedar wood is a very quality product to have. These properties may be the reason for including it here, as well as a symbolic reference to the wood of the cross. Some suppose the cross Jesus was crucified on was made of cedar wood. Now, that's just something the scholars, and I inserted that in there, seem to think. I don't know what kind of wood it was used. Don't know if the Bible says what kind of wood it was used, okay? But when you look at what's going on here in the big picture, and I'm going to use the term, maybe a tie-in to that, okay, being the case. But I have no, thus saith the Lord upon that matter, okay, just what we're told by scholars and what we look at in the types and shadows of things, okay. This hyssop plant, and it's a mint-type plant. Here again, it has fragrance to it and things of that nature. Hyssop was used for the cleansing ceremony for lepers. When David asked God, "Purge me with hyssop," in Psalms 51:7, he associated himself with the leper who needed cleansing, as well as on the cross, Jesus was offered a drink from a hyssop branch, John 19:29. So this hyssop was going to be involved in this purification process. As well as scarlet. The color of blood was used in the veil and curtains of the tabernacle, Exodus 26:31, in the garments of the high priest, Exodus 28:5-6, and the covering for the table of showbread, Numbers 4:8. Scarlet was a sign of Rahab's salvation, Joshua 2:21, and the color of the king's robe mockingly set on Jesus by Roman soldiers, Matthew 27-28. So these things had a significance in the purification process. Taken together now, okay, and I'm doing it like this. I'll pause in a minute and ask if you brethren got any questions, okay? I'll pause in just a minute. Taken together, the offering of the red heifer and the water of purification, associated with that offering are powerful pictures pointing to the perfect work of Jesus Christ. So how does that tie in? How is that a picture of Jesus Christ? Like the red heifer, Jesus was red at his sacrifice, and it's talking about his blood here, okay? Christ covered with his own blood. Like the red heifer, Jesus was pure and without spot. Like the red heifer, Jesus was never under the yoke of sin. Like the red heifer, Jesus was sacrificed outside the camp. Remember, he was taken outside the city of Jerusalem and crucified. Like the red heifer, the sacrifice of Jesus was unique. And it was a sacrifice for what? The purification of sin in verse 9 of Numbers 19. Like the red heifer, the sacrifice of Jesus is effective for all who claim it, including the stranger and sojourner, Numbers 19 and verse 10. So whosoever will is what we say today. Whosoever will come. So how do you get into that purification process? Well, it's through the watery grave of baptism, isn't it? Jesus became, figuratively speaking, the red heifer sacrifice, didn't he? Very often we talk about the lamb sacrifice, and it is a sacrifice, isn't it? The lamb without spot, without blemish, innocent, so we can look at the lamb too, has that form. So today, How would that include the sojourning stranger? Well, remember, God's already said you're going to have one law. And those that sojourn among you and the stranger among you are going to be held to that same law, right? So today when we have those that are strangers and sojourners come in amongst us, do we change our law to accommodate them? No. We don't change our law to accommodate them. In order for them to be accepted, they must become Jewish in nature. Here, this was true too. They took on the Jewish customs. We know, an example, what pops in my mind right off the bat is Cornelius in Acts chapter 10. He was a Roman, wasn't he? But we found that he prayed to God and gave much alms to the people, to the Jewish people. He had accepted the Jewish customs happening. Okay? And so by doing that, he was Jewish in nature. Okay? And so it is today. How do people come today? Well, they got to come through the law of God happening to be accepted in the camp. Now, we don't change our teaching. We don't change our structure. We don't change our organization for the stranger. Now, they can come. They're welcome to come. They're welcome to come to services every time. They're welcome to come and eat with us and everything else, right? But they're still strangers, aren't they? Because they haven't accepted the gospel, have they? Do we treat them any different in our business dealings and in our relationships and visiting them when they're sick than we would anybody else? No. Okay? But when it comes to salvation, we don't change the plan, do we? The plan is set. And so this is the picture that we're seeing here. Any of you brethren have any comment on that? I know I got kind of long-winded, but I kind of wanted to get to that. I think it kind of drives the point home at what this purification is about. Okay. Who are we going to have in verses 11 through 22 some of the other laws for purification, and this has to be touching and handling dead bodies. Reed, do you have Numbers 19? Begin reading at verse 11, and I'll let you read down, let's see, 11 through about verse 19. How about that?
And one who touches the corpse of any person shall be unclean for 7 days. That one shall purify himself from uncleanness with water on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and then he will be clean. But if he does not purify himself on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, he will not be clean. Anyone who touches a corpse, the body of a man who has died, and does not purify himself, defiles the tabernacle of the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from Israel. Because the water for impurity was not sprinkled on him, he shall be unclean. His uncleanness is still on him. This is the law when a man dies in a tent. Everyone who comes into the tent and everyone who is in the tent shall be unclean for 7 days. Every open vessel which has no covering tied down on it shall be unclean. Also, anyone who in the open field touches one who has been slain with a sword, or who has died naturally, or human bone or a grave, shall be unclean for 7 days. Then for the unclean person they shall take some of the ashes of the burnt purification from sin, and flowing water shall be added to them in a vessel. The clean person shall take hyssop and dip it in the water, and sprinkle it on the tent, and on all the furnishings, and on the persons who were there, and on the one who touched the bone of the one slain or the one dying naturally with the grave. Then the clean person shall sprinkle on the unclean on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day. And on the 7th day he shall purify him from uncleanness. He shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and shall be clean by evening.
Okay, so this is dealing with some more of the commandments of God about being unclean, and we had covered a lot of this earlier in the book of Exodus and the book of Leviticus, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But what I find real interesting with this, to start with, before they do a formal bath, what did they do? They sprinkled themselves with this purification water, didn't they? So what was that about? Well, it looks like those ingredients have some type of disinfecting impact upon what they're doing here. You know, a lot of times, what do we usually do a lot of times before we wash ourselves? And I'm going to just step out of this for just a minute. Let's say we're in the kitchen. What do we usually do? A lot of times we'll spray things down, won't we? If it's contaminated, and we'll wipe it down real good. And then a lot of times we'll get us a clean rag and some fresh water and finish it, don't we? It's a disinfecting process, isn't it? Well, if it's heavily contaminated, what do we do then? We're going to take a bath, don't we? Depending on what we're working with, don't we? So it looks like this had to do with disease control, which it did. One of the things you notice about that 7-day period, generally we've seen that before when people are set apart. We call that an incubation period, don't we? And we see that a lot of times too in our disease control today, don't we? A lot of times, you know, we'll say, well, you know, wait a week and see. Especially if we've been exposed to things like flus, infections, and things of that nature. It usually takes 5 to 7 days for it to incubate, doesn't it? So that's why it was so strict that they be held separate and apart and to work on that cleansing process, okay? You know, they didn't have the medicinal items or things that we have today, did they? But you know, really, when you stop and look at this, you can apply a lot of this today in our general health practices, can't you? Because, you know, what you have to stop and think about, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, modern medicine is now, let's see, we'll use post-World War II, let's say 1946 to 2025, so modern medicine is only about, 80 years old? The world been around 6,000 plus years. What people do? Well, you know, you're going to find there was a lot of things that were used prior to World War II in medicinal purposes that a lot of times go after some of this, doesn't it? And I'm not a dietitian, don't claim to be. The only thing I know about a diet is when they told me to cut back on my cholesterol, Daniel, I went from eating a whole rack of ribs to a half a rack. So I'm 50% of the way there, ain't I? All right. But you know, we've seen in modern times, a lot of times they had what's called the old Bible diet. You know, you've seen some of that promoted where they go back and they just follow the regiment that's given in the Old Testament on these people's diet. So it's not unusual today to find a lot of these things still in use, and they're very useful on that. Of course, we don't want to get caught up in the old law. This is what we got to remember, is what was done away with. The old law as far as salvation is concerned. Now, a lot of God's general practices and principles of nature, they still enforce just like they was when he put them there 6,000 years ago. But that old law, the law of Moses, these things that we're talking about here, we no longer practice. So Jesus took those to the cross. The remaining verses outline the laws of purification, including how one becomes impure by touching a dead body and how one is to be purified thereafter. The text provides instructions for people who have come in contact with the dead, the specific steps for purification, and the consequences of non-compliance. And, you know, I didn't mention that, but we see, you know, a lot of these laws, God, He takes pretty serious. Now, if you're not going to follow these guidelines and all like that, then you know, you're going to be put out of the camp. You know, even today, from a medical standpoint, a lot of times, what happens if people don't follow the medical guidelines and they stay sick? A lot of times they won't let you go back to work, will they? A lot of times they won't let you go back to school, will they? So, you know, some of those guidelines are still followed. You're going to have to follow some of the medical requirements if you're going to want to come back to work or school or be reinstated in society, right? So it's not that unusual to see these things. So to be put out of the camp, well, you know, all this uncleanness, you're not doing anything to help yourself. You're not going to the doctor. You're not following the purification process. We can't contaminate the whole camp because of your stubbornness, can we? So, you know, the same principle applies today. teaching points. The red heifer ordinance, Numbers 19 through 210, describes the specific requirements for the red heifer, a rare and unblemished animal symbolizing purity and perfection. This sacrifice was unique in that it was burned outside the camp, and its ashes were used for purification. The ashes mixed with water were used to cleanse those who had come in contact with the dead body, highlighting the defilement associated with death and the need for spiritual cleansing. Would that be kind of a maybe a true statement today too? Highlighting the defilement associated with death and the need for spiritual cleansing. So, today, in a spiritual sense, are we defiled by death through sin? Yeah. Where does our resurrection come in, if you will? Through Jesus Christ, doesn't it? Through the watery grave of baptism. So when you look at this, all this is really symbolic, leading to who? Jesus Christ. So Jeff, makes you wonder a lot of times, especially the Jewish scholars, the learned men of the day, the Levitical priesthood that was entrusted with the word, how did they miss it? It all pointed to who? Jesus Christ, didn't it? Okay? But anyway, they did miss it big time, didn't they? And today, it makes you wonder how people study the Bible a lot of times. And, I know you have, and I have. I've talked to a lot of people that's knowledgeable of the Bible, but they don't have the application of it. They miss the whole point about what it's about salvation, don't they? About the worship to God. And so a lot of times it takes help to misunderstand things, doesn't it? More than if I doze off here with that rain hitting on that roof, you know what happened. I just throw something up in there. Don't that sound good? Whew. The role of the priest. The priest played a critical role in the ritual, emphasizing the need for mediation between God and man. This foreshadows the ultimate high priest, Jesus Christ. Holiness and separation. This chapter underscores the importance of holiness and separation from impurity, reflecting God's nature and His call for His people to be set apart. And of course, that's the end of Numbers chapter 19. Any of you brethren have any comment or questions on it? Looks like we're going to have a little bit of time to roll on over into 20. Jeff?
We talked about the separation and the laws, what we have to do to be baptized and things like that. But if you talk on the hyssop branch, it had importance all the way through that thing because they had to dip the blood on the Passover and put it on the doors for the firstborn in the first plague.
That's true.
So it has importance all the way along, not as it might have been what they used. So I'm just wondering if they take any branch on the purification water, will it still mean the same? Or would it have to, it's just a fine point, but the same thing. Do we change things in baptism? Do we sprinkle or do we?
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't looked at it like that. I think that using that hyssop branch like that has a significant point in it, because Jesus was offered.
This is what you use.
Yeah.
And nothing else.
Right.
Because he didn't say anything else. He just said use a hyssop.
Yeah. So.
It turns over to the same teachings of what we have in the New Testament.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, there is some significance in that. It sure is. You could probably break, a lot of this down. Probably, and I've said this before. Probably, if we went back through this, we wouldn't be talking the same lessons that we're talking now because there's so much in there, right? It's kind of like going through the book of Genesis. The more you get into it, the more that's out there, right? In the book of Exodus. So, yeah, very good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Sure hadn't. So, we're going to move into Numbers chapter 20. And as I said, Numbers chapter 20 is going to be full and rich in the historical process. You're going to have the death of Miriam. You're going to have Moses smiting the rock. You're going to have Aaron's death. His son, Eleazar, is going to take over formally. So this is quite a notable chapter in the Bible where a lot of events are going to take place here. So we know that Miriam and Aaron and Moses both are going to be dead. They never go over into the promised land. And we said if you want to set a time frame on this, which sometimes the way this is written, there's a time frame here. They're probably formally going into the promised land a few years out, okay? Even though they're on the edge, they're up here at Kadesh Barnea. You got to remember the punishment was for not going doing what God said was to wander for 40 years, right? So we're getting down, close to the end of the 40-year wandering. These people are dying. The old group is dying off, and those above 20 years of age with Joshua and Caleb are finally going to travel through Edom and go up to take the promised land. They're going to come across the River Jordan up there around Ai, Jericho, up in that area, but that's on down the line here a little bit. So. Numbers chapter 20, and the conversation is going to go something like this. The death of Miriam, as we said. Moses smiting the rock. And Aaron's death. So these are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in Numbers chapter 20. Numbers 20 is a poignant chapter in the Bible that focuses on the people of Israel during their wilderness wandering. This chapter describes their complaint due to the lack of water, the miraculous provision of water from the rock, Moses' act of disobedience, Aaron's son, the interaction with the king of Edom. It's a narrative filled with divine intervention, human shortcomings, and the transition of leadership. So this chapter is loaded with biblical history of the children of Israel. Numbers chapter 20. Miriam died and is buried. Jeff, I think we're to you, aren't we? Numbers chapter 20, verse 1.
Verse 1.
Yeah, just verse 1.
And the people of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Sin in the first month. And the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there.
Okay, so as I said, they're up here. They travel up to Kadesh Barnea, and here we have them camped here at this location, and it says Miriam died. Moses' sister has passed away. Miriam, she died, and she was buried. Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, is a significant figure in the Bible narrative, particularly in Exodus account. Her death is recorded in the book of Numbers, marking the end of an era for the Israelites as they journey through the wilderness. And y'all going to see the same statement made about Aaron and Moses too. It's the end of an era. It's the end of that group of people, isn't it? It's drawing nigh for them to enter in, but this old group, no matter how they followed God, did not enter in, did they? Miriam's role and legacy. I thought we'd take a little bit of time and kind of take a look at who she was and what this is all about and how this is significant in the life of the children of Israel. Miriam is first introduced in the book of Exodus as a sister who watches over the infant Moses when he is placed in a basket in the Nile River, Exodus 2:4. You know, you can see God's providence working in this the whole time, can't you? You go all the way back to the beginning, right? You know, what is the probability of today if we placed a child in a basket and put it in the river that his sister would find him and his mother raise him. You know, you're going to have to say that probability is probably very slim in the way we look at statistics, right? But you can see the providence of God in this. Anything's possible, isn't it? Okay? When you stop and look at this thing, and I'm going to back up a little bit. Was water involved in the salvation of Moses? Yeah. He was put in the basket, he was put in the water, wasn't he? He floated down the river, didn't he? Was water involved in the salvation of Noah? Floating down the river? Yeah. So. Her quick thinking and courage led to Moses being nursed by his own mother, Jochebed, under the protection of Pharaoh's daughter. This early act of bravery set the stage for her later role as a leader amongst the Israelites. Miriam is recognized as a prophetess in Exodus 15:20-21 at the crossing the Red Sea. She leads the women of Israel in song and dance, celebrating the Lord's triumph over the Egyptians. Then Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her with tambourines dancing. And Miriam sang back to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." Talking about the Egyptians being buried in the Red Sea. Challenges and controversies. Despite her prominent role, Miriam's journey is not without challenges. In Numbers 12, she and Aaron speak against Moses because of his Cushite wife, questioning his unique position as God's chosen leader. As a result, God afflicts Miriam with leprosy, a punishment that underscores the seriousness of her action. Moses intercedes on her behalf, and after 7 days of isolation outside the camp, she is healed and restored to the community. The brevity of the biblical account of her death contrasts with her significant contribution to the Israelite community, highlighting the transit nature of human life and leadership. Her burial at Kadesh, a place associated with both rebellion and divine judgment, serves as a reminder of the complexities of faith and obedience in the journey toward the promised land. So, was Miriam's life without problems? No. Were there things that came up in her life that caused her to lose maybe some fellowship with God? She had to be restored. Yeah. So, that's one thing about the Bible. It gives us both sides, both viewpoints of the character of people, doesn't it? As great a prophetess, and it does refer to her as a prophetess she was, it was not without some problems, was it? Okay? So, any of you brethren have any comments about Miriam? The Israelites complained. Verses 1 through 5, we'll back up and grab verse 1. Morgan, I think we're up here with you. Go ahead and read verse 1 through 5.
21 through 5.
Yeah,
Then the children of Israel, the whole congregation, came to the wilderness of Zin in the first month. And the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron. And the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, "If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into the wilderness, that we and our animals should die here? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink."
Okay, so here we are, and this is a story that a lot of times we refer to about Moses and the people. Here they are, they wanted water, and they're murmuring against Moses, complaining that there's no water. And you would think by this time that with all the providence that God had worked in their midst with everything that's gone on, they would have learned by now that what? God's gonna provide us some water. We just need to wait for his time, don't we? But that's not the case, is it? And so we find these people now, they're murmuring or chiding with Moses. And, here again, they're back in this mindset. Would it be that God, we had died when our brethren died before the Lord? Let us out here. Why have you led this congregation out here into this wilderness and our cattle, and we die? Looked like they would have seen through all this that God is preparing them and he was going to take care of them, doesn't it? But that's not the case. He said, we're out here and we don't have no water. You brought us out of Egypt to bring us unto this evil place, And it was a rough place, okay, out there where they're at, a desert, wasteland type place, and we know water is a prime source or prime asset for one to have. But you got to look back. What had happened so far with this? Y'all still here, ain't you? Y'all been given water and manna and quail and egg, And to give Moses kind of a thought, after, he had already had an issue with them. That's why God set up the eldership and things like that, the leaders over each of the 12 tribes and judges. So Moses wouldn't have to bear the whole burden of this thing, okay? Only the significant, important things would go before Moses to be judged. But still, all this grumbling and complaining, Greg, you can kind of see how Moses might have had Excedrin headache number 969, It just goes to show you, though, I think a point that we're going to see in this, and maybe a lesson in this, if we're not careful, others can rob us of our salvation, can't they? So we have to be watchful about things, don't we? We have to remember that we'll leave our headaches and problems with God and let him work it out and not take it on ourselves. So Moses took it upon himself. You could just see Moses with that rod, and God done said, you do this, and what does Moses do? He takes that rod, he done had it. He venting that hostility, wasn't he? So that wasn't a good thing in the eyes of God. So we'll stop right there and get ready for the worship service. We'll pick up right here next week.